Welcome to Hello and welcome to tonight's Google Hangout on Air on the International Mother Language Day. I hope you are having a wonderful day, speaking your mother tongue and enjoying it together with your family or online with your friends. My name is Rita Rosenback. I am the blogger at multilingualparenting.com and the author of the book Bringing Up a Bilingual Child. Sorry about that. I had a bit of a loop back. And with me today, I have. I'm so happy that Marianna Du Bosq from Bilingual Avenue joined us, and she's a wonderful resource. Her website has got a lot of podcasts, really useful, really interesting one. I recommend everybody visiting her website and listening to the podcasts. You please just introduce yourself, Mariana?
Sure. I'm very excited to be with you today. Like Rita said, I'm Mariana Du Bosq. In terms of a little bit of background, I was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and then right before I started high school, my family moved to the United States. So I'm both bilingual and bicultural. Both cultures have played a really big role in my life. And this past summer, because of my husband's work, we were transferred to Germany. So now we've added a third culture and a third language. We have a little girl. She's about 2.5. And we're raising her with the one parent, one language policy. So I speak exclusively in Spanish to her, while my husband speaks exclusively in English, and then she gets some German in school. Like Rita said, I have a blog and a podcast called Bilingual Avenue, where I interview parents and experts to give you the tools and what to expect when raising multilingual children. One last thing I'd like to point out as way of background, because I do think it's relevant to the conversation today, is I'm a former educator, and I've taught in a variety of settings. I've taught in settings where I spoke to my students in their mother language, in this case Spanish, and then helped them transition throughout the year to the community language, English. I've also taught in settings where I had to exclusively speak the community language, yet my children were not yet proficient in the language. So we used many strategies to help them achieve their goals and be on grade level. So when it comes to the questions, if you've got any specific questions about that, if you're in any of those situations, I'd be more than happy to help.
Oh, that's fantastic. There will be so much useful information you can give to parents. So that's great. So today is International Mother Language Day. Just briefly about the history of the day. It's United Nations Day that has been celebrated since the year 2000. And the date of the 21st of February is chosen based on something that happened in the former Pakistan, East Pakistan, in 1952, when students were shot by police when they were protesting for their right to use Bengali, their mother tongue, in their education. So that's the history of it. And from then, the International Mother Language Day is a day where you promote cultural diversity and multilingualism. UNESCO is now the main driver behind the day, and they are working for children in the third world. So this year's theme is inclusion in and through education, language counts. So the aim is to make sure that all children in all countries get access to high quality education in their own mother tongue. So these are, most children, they are bilingual, but they might have to go visit school in a different language to their mother tongue. Tonight we are going to be concentrating on what Mariana and I know most about bilingual children in general. When they go to school, Mariana will start with the younger children. I will then speak about older children and what issues there might be and what you can do. And please do feel free to ask any questions at any time through the Q&A option. So, Mariana, so when you got a little daughter, don't you? How old is she?
I do. She's just almost 2.5.
Fantastic. So I'm sure you've thought about this, what will happen when she goes to school in Germany, where you live now. So I'll let you speak about small children and bilingual children and then starting school.
Sure. So starting school can be a really exciting time. It can also be a nervous time, both for the parents and for the children. So what I'd like to do today is give you some tools and strategies that you can do to really enhance that experience. So I'd like to talk about how to prepare your child to start school, how to build a strong foundation with your teacher and the school administration, and then for those of you that have a choice, and when it comes to schooling, what are the things that you want to look at to make sure you're finding a good program? So let's start with preparing your child. That's sort of the first step, and we'll lay the foundation. The first thing you want to do, just like with any transition, is talk to your child about what's happening. If you've got any books, for example, about starting a new school, that may be a great way to talk about it, especially because you can read them over and over, and your child can really internalize what may be happening. You could do simple things like drive to the school so your child can see what it looks like so it's not such a shock on the first day. And if you know other children from the community who may be attending the same school, especially if they speak the languages that you're reinforcing at home, have them come over for a play date and see if there's ways that you can introduce that. Now, for those of you that are working at home on a language that's not the same language that will be spoken in the school, you may want to teach your child just a few basic words to make that transition a little bit easier. Simple social words like hi or bye, so they're exposed to it and they can understand what their teacher is telling them. And then basic needs like how to go to the bathroom or how to get some water. If you know that your child needs to go to the bathroom often, then you definitely want to make sure that they feel comfortable with those words. So look at your routine right now with your child. What are the things that they typically need throughout the day, and incorporate those words slowly into their vocabulary. Now, that would be as much as I would recommend in terms of the community language, because once your child starts school, they're going to be bombarded with exposure in the community language, and you're really going to have to reinforce your mother tongue or your heritage language at home. So you're going to want to continue what you were doing before, but you may have to even do a little bit more. You may think about ways to increase the exposure. You can do that through books, technology, music, play dates with other children that speak the language. So really think about what are some other ways that you can support it so you're balancing both of the languages. And the last thing you want to do is you want to value and model the need for using the mother tongue. Again, your child's going to be getting a lot more exposure, and they're also going to be seeing that community language used a lot more. They may wonder, do I really need to use it? So you want to make sure you continue to create the need. You can do that by continue to speak exclusively your mother tongue with your child. Again, you can incorporate some play dates. You can invite other native speakers to speak to your child. If you have family members, make sure you communicate with them and tell them you really need their help to increase the exposure. And if they're not near you, you can use tools like Skype and FaceTime to increase more exposure as well. So those would be the tips that I would give you in terms of preparing to start school, especially if the language of the school is different from the one you're speaking at home.
Great, thank you. That's fantastic. Absolutely wonderful ideas and tips there. We just had a question in from MG, and the question is: we live in the US. Both parents and the nannies speak our native language, Russian, to the kids. Both are 1 year. They are 1 year old. And how do we teach the kids English so that they have an easier time when they start kindergarten or school? You already mentioned this. You spoke about it. So teach a few words. Do you think that they need an extensive vocabulary, or can they just start school without knowing that much of the school language?
Well, every child's a little bit different, and so they're obviously going to adapt differently. The majority of the cases, just about every time, the child will, once they start school, the community language takes over. And so even though there may be a few rough days, weeks, or months, depending on the child, you may be very concerned at first about that transition. But what you'll soon find is once they feel comfortable with the community language, you're going to be working really hard to support the mother tongue. And it may be difficult if one parent, for example, decides to speak exclusively in English so that they know more English starting school. Once they start school, it may be difficult for you to go back to the mother language because now they've sort of created that relationship. So even though it seems like a really daunting task at first, I think just really conveying some of those basic words so they can navigate their first few days can be enough.
Yes, absolutely. And I could tell about my experience with my youngest daughter. When we moved to England, she was actually already 6 years old, and she didn't know any English when she started school here in England. But of course, like you say, every child is different, and you can't say that this is how it's going to work with every child. But because we had two minority languages at home, I was speaking Swedish and their father Punjabi, and neither of us could even think about dropping any of those languages because that's what we had already always spoken. So when we moved, we came into a situation where there were 3 languages in parallel. And she started school, and I must say she started a fantastic school, and the teachers were really helpful. And I know that about the 3 first weeks, she didn't have a clue what was happening at school, but she was happy. She was content to go. And I think that's the crucial bit. If the child is happy, even if they don't understand, if they feel included, it's okay. It took then about 3 months until I noticed when she came back that she could actually tell me what had happened. So from that I took it she understood a bit, and then it was onwards and upwards from there. And she had never one day said, "Mom, I don't want to go." So that was fantastic.
One other thing that you can think about is, rather than you, the parents, switching to incorporate more English or your community language, you can enroll your child in maybe like a team activity, for example, a local soccer league. So they're hearing the community language from their peers, but you still continue to provide that mother tongue, because it's that relationship with you that will carry them through in the later years. So you can find that exposure throughout your community, but I would caution against having you be the one that switches.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. And so how do you go on to choose the right school for your child then?
Yeah, so some parents don't have an option. They have to go to the district school, and so they may not have the flexibility that others do. But there are some instances where parents can either choose a charter school, a private school, or have choice within their district. So many of us who are trying to support language also want our children to be in a language academic environment. So if that's the case, there's some things you really want to look into. The first thing is you want to find a school that is really open and welcoming to both cultural and linguistic diversity, despite whether they're a language school or not. And you can get a sense from meeting with the staff in advance by maybe going to open houses or maybe asking to tour the school. So you can just, through your line of questioning, just get a sense, because your child may be the only child in the classroom who speaks more than one language at home. So you want to make sure that they're welcome, that they're not scared of that they have had some experience. So that's the first rule of thumb, of something you really want to keep in mind. If you do have an opportunity to go to a language school, you want to make sure it's an effective and a good academic language program. Typically, the rule of thumb is that if the curriculum is spending about 200 hours on language, that breaks down to about 5 hours a week, depending on your school system, then that tends to have good outcomes in terms of language. Anything below that, you're starting to get sort of varied results, and it really depends on the instruction and the support that you're giving at home. So think about 2 hours, when you're meeting with your school, is that something that they're trying to incorporate? Again, if you're looking for a language school, you also want to make sure that the language is carried out outside of the classroom. For example, are things like art and music also taught in the language, in the mother tongue? Does the staff, the administrative staff, communicate to the children in the mother language? Let's say, for example, you're in the United States and you're in a school that's supporting Mandarin. You want your child to sort of see the language played out throughout the school. You want to see that the school has really internalized language as part of their personality. Otherwise, your child will pick up on the fact that this is just taught in the classroom and they don't see examples of models of it being used outside. So again, we're really looking for modeling good behavior and the need of using the language. Then you also want to look at the teacher certification. So are those that are going to be teaching the language classes, are they native speakers? And if they're not, which is okay, are they fluent? So you want to be looking at the proficiency and, of course, academic credentials of the teachers. Especially if it's not a district school like a private school, you still want to make sure that there are good academic standards. Now, let's say that you speak a mother tongue, that your mother language is one that's not very popular for academic schools. So let's say I'll use Rita's example from her background. Let's say she's trying to support Swedish at home, and the only school in the community that supports language is a French school. Well, even though it's not your language, you still may want to consider having your child attend. Because again, it's obviously going to be a school that values cultural and language diversity. So that takes us back to our first point. Yes, it may not be the language you're trying to support, but they're going to likely be familiar with families who come from a diverse linguistic background and likely very willing to work with you and help your child with their needs. Now, the last thing I'll say is if you don't have a choice or there are simply no language programs in your school, you can consider a heritage program. So these are typically programs that take place Saturday morning, and they may teach German if that's your mother language that you're trying to support. Now, if you don't have one in your community, I would challenge you to start one. Find other parents and families in your community who speak that mother tongue and start with them. And even if you don't have families and peers around you with that language, approach other parents within your circles of friends. Chances are that other parents will be really excited about the idea of having their child go to a school or to a small program, whether it's just an hour a week, that's taught by a native parent. And that'll also give your child more exposure and more role models if they see their peers also speaking that language that you're trying to support at home. So those would be my tips for when it comes to choosing a school and trying to supplement the mother language in an academic setting.
Fantastic, and I really love your last idea there, where you can, if there's nothing, then why not start it yourself? It doesn't have to be kind of a program. Depending on what age children are, just start a play group.
Right.
Start with just a small play date and build it up from there, because quite often you'll find that there are other parents that would love to do exactly the same, and that will be of a great use to all of you. So that's fantastic.
Sure.
And so when you've chosen the school and your child is in school, teachers do play. You already touched on different types of teachers, but then when you have your teacher, it's really important to establish the relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I can tell you that from being in the classroom that it's really important to establish a strong foundation with your teacher and your administration, and you can do that in a variety of ways. The first thing you want to do is really have an open dialogue with your teacher. At the beginning of the year, many schools will have an open house or a meet and greet with parents, and even if they don't, you should approach your teacher and just talk to them about your child. Those first few weeks, those teachers are working really hard to get to know your family environment and your child so they can help them succeed academically throughout the school year. So be very open about your language policies, what languages are spoken at home, how they're supported, what your child's strengths are, a little bit even about their personality. That can go a long way. If your teacher has never worked with a bilingual or multilingual child, they may be a little bit apprehensive and overwhelmed, maybe even scared. So by you opening the communication, and you're really letting them know, I'm here to help you, I'm a team player, I care about my child's education, so let's work together. So just a basic conversation can go a really long way. Mm-hmm. Now to think about some more tangible and concrete ideas that you can do is you can think about maybe supplying some materials in your mother tongue for the classroom. Teachers are always looking for materials, so you can take a look at maybe what the curriculum is going to be taught throughout the year and maybe supply some of those. For example, books in a classroom library are always of need. So if you can approach your teacher and say, listen, I've got some books in Spanish, let's say that's your mother tongue, that I'd love to either donate or let you borrow for the year. That can be a great, again, modeling aspect for your child to see, oh, here's a Spanish book, or here's a book from my own home that is now in the classroom library. If you have children that are reading, they may actually really enjoy during story time being able to read that to their children, to their other classmates. And if there are other parents in your classroom who also speak the mother tongue, they'll be thankful to see resources in their language too. So you can think about books, you can think about puzzles, you can think about games, you can even think about labeling some of the classroom items. Now, another thing that you can do is you can spend some time volunteering in the classroom. Teachers are always looking for help. So you can talk to them in advance about coming in and spending an hour here or there throughout the week and communicating to your child in the mother tongue. If there are other children, again, in the classroom who speak your mother tongue, communicate to them, because that's a great way to model the behavior to your children. I will say that teachers are ultimately going to be the managers of the classroom, and they are managing a lot of different needs. Your child's not the only one there. So make sure you find that balance where you don't seem like you're just overbearing and trying to step into what's happening, but really take that back seat of the helper and reminding the teacher that you're a team player. One last idea that I'll give you, if you do want to volunteer in the classroom, you can take it a step forward and say, I know, for example, you're teaching right now about the ocean. I've got this great book that I found in Spanish, for example, about the ocean. Can I come and can I read it to the classroom, and maybe we can have an activity around it? Think of ways that you can simplify it for the other children who don't speak Spanish so that everyone can participate. But then you're giving some real structure to what you're trying to teach. And think about how your child will be to see you up there and seeing their classmates having a good time speaking your mother tongue. So that's, we can't all volunteer in the classroom, but if you are able to carve out some time and be really intentional about how you're volunteering your time, you'll probably see some great results.
Absolutely, that's a really great advice there. And what you said about being a role model, that is so important. And to see, it's important for your child to see that you are proud of your language, you are ready to stand in front of a class or do something else, but that you're consistent using it, because that attitude, that rubs off on your child, and that's how they are going to feel about it as well.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So I will now go into a few some of the typical questions and issues that arise, maybe not at the early stage, like Mariana has been speaking about small children and when they start to school and how to handle that situation. I'll speak about some tricky. I'll pick up on those topics that most people ask me about and which I think most people are interested in. And the first one would be what to do when the child answers you in the wrong language. Wrong, I'm doing a quotation mark here, because there is no wrong language, of course. All languages are right. But if your child doesn't answer in the language you would like him or her to speaking, then what do you do? And I know from many parents that it can be a really hard time. And actually, when it happens is when the child goes to school, typically, because then the environment becomes more important, and they spend up to 6-7 hours speaking only the school language. And of course, when they come home, it's natural that if they want to speak about something, then they use that language because that's the language they've experienced their day in. So I know it might feel like hurtful the first time when it happens, and you think, oh my, what have I done wrong? Why is my child all of a sudden answering in the wrong language to me? Have I failed? Well, no, no, and no. You haven't failed. You haven't done anything wrong. That's just how it happens. And let the child kind of speak about what their experiences are at the school. Don't stop them. I know because I was actually told off by my youngest daughter that I sometimes did this when she came home to school. I said, "Mom, I just wanted to tell you something, and then you told me to say it in Swedish." So I've learned through trial and error about that one. So what you can do is listen to what your child has to say, and then just you can still answer in your own language. So don't switch. That's important. It's quite okay to have a discussion in two different languages. Both understand both, so that's fine. And then later on in the evening, when everything has calmed down a bit, speak about it again, and make sure that you introduce the vocabulary, because that might be one of the things that why your child is not speaking to you in your language. And the child might be, well, I don't know what this word, I don't know what locker is in the language, I don't know what the assembly room is, or I don't know what this topic is called. So that might be one of the reasons why they so rather do it they want to quickly say something, so they'll do it in a way that's easiest for them. So that's one thing that you can actually prepare for before your child goes to school. Make sure that your child has the vocabulary to speak about school and schoolwork in your language. That might mean you'll have to look up some words yourself for the different topics if it's a while since you've been to school and everything has moved on. So yes, you might have to look up the current terminology so you can help your child speak about it. And like Mariana, like you said, the want and the need is important for a child to keep on speaking a language. And so you can't force, you can't I always say you can't compel a child to speak a language, but you can make it compelling. So that means you need to create the need through different means, and every parent is their own child's expert. You will know what makes your child tick, what do they really want. Then think about this and find something to do around that very topic. So the child wants to use your language, because as soon as the child wants to, then it will do it. It's also keep in mind, like I said before, this is a phase that actually really many bilingual children go through. It's a crucial phase, and it's crucial that you stick to your language. Don't make a big deal of it if the wrong language comes through, but it's stay consistently using your language. And this is why I do promote consistency in language use. I know there are many schools about this, and there are also research that shows that even parents who mix languages, children can grow up bilingually easily. But the thing is that happens in an environment where there is enough exposure for all of the languages. So that's not something that you can say, yes, this will work. What will work is if you have created the habit, the routine of you and your child speaking your language, and they will then continue doing that. If you start switching from one to another, just like you said, Mariana, it's so much more difficult to stick to the routine that you're used to. And and what about refusing to understand if they speak the wrong language? Well, I'm not a big fan of that. I know many parents do it, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but to me, I wouldn't want to create any negative connections with the language. And also, you're going to be found out. They know that you can understand. Even if you've managed to hide them from them, at some point they will hear you over speaking on the phone to someone else in the language. You will be found out, and then you don't really have a leg to stand on. And also, language is about communication. I can't really see that it would be right to refuse to understand if it's the so-called wrong language. So I would still understand. I would repeat what the child said in your own language, and just make sure to bring in the vocabulary and just stick to it.
Yeah, Rita, those are some great points because, like you said, many multilingual families face that, and it can be a really tough obstacle. So I think that the key from everything you're saying is to continue to stay flexible, try different things, and then just have the patience, but don't give up. This is still just an obstacle in a long journey, so keep with it.
Absolutely.
Now, what about for children who, at different points, maybe they were struggling with the language and the parents maybe tabled it for a side, but they want to continue and now reintroduce the language now that they're older? What would be the advice that you'd have for families, again, reintroducing a language to older children?
Yes, well, this is also a question that is many parents ask and wonder about, because we all know life happens, and we might have set goals for ourselves, but then life gets too busy, and language, maybe we feel the language is not that important. We say, okay, it's just easier, we just speak the majority language so we can get on with it. And then after a few years you notice, well, I actually do really want my child to learn my language. So what you need to do then is to, again, we need the want and the need from the child. With all the children, I would recommend to speak about it, reason about it, say why you want. First of all, you need to be clear in your own mind. It's not enough that you think, I want my child to learn my language. You need to think deeper about it. Why do I want my child to speak my language? And think about what all the advantages and then what it means to you that your child can speak to, let's say, like extended family. And also think of the opposite situation, like how would you feel if your child couldn't speak to their grandparents? Because when you think of those scenarios, those will kind of wake feelings within you that will motivate you and make you committed. And it is important, especially when you're reintroducing a language for a child, it's so important to stay committed. So first of all, so to say, speak to yourself, make sure you know your own reasons and why you want to do it, and so you are 100% sure that this is what I want to do and this is what I'm going to commit to. Then speak to your child about it. Explain how you feel. Be open. I would recommend be open and tell them why it is so important to you. Think about what you've just gone through in your mind and explain that to your child. Also, I know children won't kind of make much of financial career benefits when they are around just teenager or just there, but it's good to mention all these benefits to them. And then there are those who kind of go cold turkey and then said, all right, from now on I will only speak this language to you because I know you understand. I'm not sure that's the right approach, because children will be resistant. That's just a fact. And so I'd rather reintroduce it gradually and do it. Decide that we are going to do it. I would recommend to set a date. From this date onwards, we will speak my language, and then you choose a time when it's when you're relaxed. Don't choose like in the morning just when we're all rushing around trying to get ready for the day. Don't choose that time. Choose meal times or evening times or weekends. So it's a relaxed environment. And then again, think of things that motivate your child. what can make them really want to speak it. See what you can find. Is there a hobby that they are really interested in? Could you reintroduce that language that way? So there are many different ways of doing it. And then also increase your own use of your language, because again we come back to the fact that you need to be the great role model for your child, and show your pride in your language and in your culture, because when you do, like you said, when you do that, a child picks up on it. Even if you don't say anything, if a child notices that you switch away from your language very quickly, that children will pick up on that. You might not think that they do, but they do. They notice how you behave with your own language. So continue being. It will be a big commitment. You will have to work on yourself and the whole situation, but it can be done. And also, I mean, normally these are then children that have been speaking. Let's say before they went to school, they were fluent, they were speaking, and then it just fizzled away. The language is still there. It's not gone. They are what's called passive or receptive bilingual, so they can understand, but they don't speak it. And that is such a good ground to build on, to bring it in, to make it active again. You need to be very positive and encouraging, depending on how old the child is. Like I said, you can't bribe a child to speak your language, but you might use a little bribe now and then to kind of push them just at the point of, well, they're about to speak, but they're not yet really doing it. But they said, well, okay, you speak my language the whole day with me today, and tomorrow we can do this, go together to the park, or it's something that the child really wants to do. So they have the motivation, and then give plenty of positive feedback when they do.
Yeah, those are all great tips. I think that the fun piece is really important in terms of finding things that are really exciting to your child, because then there's a natural connection of them wanting to do it. And I love that you touched on the family aspect. I've met a lot of parents before who've said, I just don't know if it's worth passing this language to my child. It's not really spoken by a lot of people. Then when I ask, well, do you want them to be able to communicate with your parents, with their cousins? The immediate answer is yes, you're right. And that's where a lot of the value comes in. And you can find some motivation within your child, because there's a natural connection that they'll want to do with family. And so if you're able to incorporate them and have them be your helpers, that can be very helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, what about, we've talked about as children to get older, how to motivate them. Let's talk about the teenage years, because those can be tough. What resources and what tips do you have for parents to motivate that really exciting and challenging age group?
Yes, yes, indeed. They can be challenging, but I must say I love teenagers. Teenagers are fantastic. I love people who tell me directly what they think, and teenagers certainly do that. I find that a lot easier than having to try to figure out what someone really thinks.
Right.
But yes, you're right. And especially with teenagers, your best tool is if you have stayed consistent and used your language, because that's become an ingrained routine in your family. So that would be the best thing to do from the start. But if you haven't, and you've had to reintroduce the language, and you're kind of just about there, but it's not quite doing it yet, first of all, do stay persistent, because your child might rebel and might not be happy at the moment, but they will thank you later on. They will be so happy you did. I have spoken to many adult bilinguals and those who didn't become bilinguals, and I am yet to meet one single person who would have said, oh, I regret learning this language, I shouldn't have. I've never met anyone like that. But I've lost count on how many I've met who've said how thankful they were that their parents persisted, and that they didn't they ignored them when they were trying to rebel as teenagers. And that's what everybody says. So keep that in mind at those points when it doesn't seem to be going that well. Just stick with it. And so what should you do then? For teenagers, the peers are more important than ever. It's so important what the friends think and what they're doing. So again, if you can find something away from the majority language environment, where your teenager can do something together with other teenagers in the language, that would be absolutely fantastic. I know this is not always possible, depending on the sorry, I was just looking at another question there. Depending on the if there are other families, if there's a community, there might not be any hobbies or groups. But in today's world, we've got technology like what we're using now. Try to find, if no relatives or friends in the home country or wherever they live, that speak the language as the main language, and then see if you find someone who's got the same interests. And I wouldn't worry too much about what they interest in. Well, in limits, of course. But if they find, like, if they like games, if your teenager likes games, and there is a game that he or she likes in the language, then try to find someone else who also likes the game, and try to connect them so they can speak about, so they have a reason to speak about that. And or just if you have a community, see if you can arrange a party with the teenagers. I know you can't really steer about, but that was a wrong phrase. You can't arrange a party for the teenager. Try to introduce the idea that they could have a party together, and that you would help them, but they can decide themselves, but about that you would have their music in the language, and maybe games or whatever they would like to do. Social media is another other place where teenagers can use the minority language with others. So yes, I know you have to be a bit careful with what they do, but most teenagers use social media. So again, see if you could encourage them to use the social media in your language. And then one of the things that I find really important is that, sorry, I just lost my earpiece. You have, I don't know how to express this, but having been a role model for your child, and you've spoken your language, and you can have the kind of more deeper discussion with the teenager, and kind of be as a parent, be vulnerable, and show them really on a deep level how important this is to you. Because if they don't speak your language, there will come a time when you are no longer around. And if you are the only connection between your child and, let's say, other relatives, when you are no longer around, then that link is away, and there is no link anymore. And I would honestly be that open with children, and speak from your heart, and say why it is so important.
Yeah, Rita, if I could actually add to that about the fact that you can reason with teenagers, that's something that my parents did with my sister and I. I mentioned that I moved to the United States right before high school, so I was 13, but my brother was only 5. And so we had this sort of family meeting with my sister and I. My parents said, you both have a really strong foundation in Spanish, and we see that you may have this natural tendency to want to switch to speak in English to each other. But your brother's only 5, and he can really easily lose that language. And that's not something that we want, and not something that we think you want. And we completely agreed, and we took on that task and sort of that role of, we've got to protect my brother, and we want him to be able to speak Spanish and have the culture be just as big a part as it is for us. And so just having a really simple conversation sealed the deal for us. And to this day, when my parents are in the room, we continue to speak Spanish because we just sort of internalize that role and take that on to protect another family member from being a part of this big thing that we were.
Yes, obviously, your parents did a great job there by them being the great role models and speaking to you in the right way, that kind of that you felt, that you understood and felt, because clearly from what you're saying I can hear that really went through to you, and you took that on. So and that relationship will be different in different families, but it is to make sure that you find that relationship, right, and speak about it like that. That's great. Thank you for that. We've got another question that has come in here. It's from Carolina. We live in the US. We speak Polish and Spanish to our toddler and English together, so for English parents, I think, and we will homeschool. As the primary homeschooling parent, I feel most comfortable in English for academics. How do we encourage our native language once homeschooling?
Well, I can take that. I think, yes, if you want to speak English as your home language, or rather through your homeschooling, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're in the United States and your child will eventually enter an academic environment, even if it's in college in English. You may want to make sure that you're balancing that. So in ways that you can incorporate Spanish or Polish, I mentioned that some schools are able to do that through art and music. So even if you're teaching the content in terms of literacy, such as reading, writing, and math, in English, you can still incorporate some of the other really important activities like music, art, crafts, that sort of stuff into your curriculum. So you're able to still separate that, but have it be all cohesive into one program, but still sort of showing and modeling the value of using your Spanish and your Polish in the school day.
That's fantastic. And I suppose making sure, we haven't spoken about one of my most favorite topics about books, having a lot of books around in your native language. That's so important on all for all age groups from the very start, when they can only understand the pictures, but to get familiar with the language even before they can read, and when they kind of start showing interest in reading, then following the words with your finger when you're reading in a book. And this is especially important if your language is using a different script than the majority language, that your child gets used to it and knows that there is many ways of writing stuff. So yes, that's great.
If I could add, speaking of reading, for example, if you build strong literacy skills in one language, your child can then easily transfer them from one to the other. So if you're teaching, for example, reading comprehension in English, because that's part of your curriculum, building those skills will, again, transfer to the Spanish and the Polish. There are a lot of skills that you can teach in one language, like the alphabet, how the alphabet works, provided that you're working with a similar alphabet. You teach it in English, but those skills will still be carried to the other languages. The direction of print, again, if you're working with a language that writes from left to right, which in your case you are, and you're teaching those skills as well. So there's actually quite a bit that you can do, and that you'll notice that your child, if you're providing resources in Spanish and Polish, like Rita said, the books, you'll be amazed at how much they're able to translate from one to the other.
Absolutely. Right, I think we might have time for one more question, and this is one that many parents unfortunately have to deal with, is our child is not that fluent in the majority language, and now her teacher told us to drop the home language and only speak English so she would pick up English. Oh dear. I can start, and you can. We could speak about this for hours, I think. But
Sure.
I can start, and you can then add your Mariana. Dropping a language is never the answer. It's a strong home language will help your child pick up the majority language at school, or evolve at school and get better in reading and writing and everything in the majority language. It's not a hindrance. I usually use the example of a child is not like an empty glass when it comes to languages. So if you pour one language in and it's full, and then you can't put any more in the glass, it doesn't work like that. For a child, it's got one glass for each language, and actually both of the glasses get bigger the more languages there are, because the languages support each other. So if like in your case, Lisa, if the teacher tells you to drop a language, so I would first arm yourself with the fact. You can, if you look on my blog, there's a lot of I think there's an article about dropping language. Maybe Mariana, just let me know afterwards if you've got anything on it. There are other places where you can find, even if your child has got some speech impediment or anything, dropping a language is not the solution. So arm yourself with the facts, and then speak with the teacher and find out what's behind it. Why does this teacher think that dropping language is a good idea? Because it is not the right answer. And is it just that it would be easier for the teacher? Which I do understand. I fully empathize with teachers that got children from many different nationalities, maybe in a class, and many different languages. It's not always easy. But that's that moment in time. For your child, the language will be there forever, for the whole of your child's life. It is so important that you keep it and not drop it. So yes, those are my first thoughts. It kind of upsets me a bit when I hear that this still goes on.
Yes. Yeah, so I've also had experience with parents and speech language pathologists giving that advice. It still shocks me that it's so prevalent, but that's never the solution. Let me start with the resources. On episode 4 of the podcast, I talk with Dr. Brenda Gorman, and she actually goes through the list of all the common myths about bilingualism and multilingualism, and she basically debunks one by one. So if you're looking to arm yourself with the facts, that's a great resource. Another one that I'll point out is episode 33. That's with Dr. Alejandro Bryce, another speech pathologist, and he talks about some of the four common phenomena that a parent or a child will face when learning a second language later on. So this child didn't learn them at the same time from birth. They learned one first and a second one later. It walks you through what are some of the things that you may expect and that are normal and when to be concerned. So that's another great resource. Now, in terms of dropping the language again, don't. It's going to take some time. The first thing is to be patient. Your teacher may undoubtedly wants the best for your child, but this may be the first time that they're facing it. They may be scared. They may be very concerned. So you have to be strong and know that you're making the right decision. And then if you want to sort of speed up the process of learning that community language, then think of ways to add exposure. Again, I don't think necessarily the exposure needs to come from you, because later on in life you're going to be actually trying to show more exposure to your minority or heritage language. So think of ways for that to come in other situations. We talked earlier about maybe joining a team, like a soccer league nearby where your child can hear other children speaking. Maybe join a play group or a play day where they can also hear it. Maybe even a language tutor. And sometimes when we hear tutors, we think just another person on the other side of the table lecturing your child. That doesn't have to be the case. You could have a native speaker, a sitter, come over and play a game with your child. Make it fun. And that can help to speed up the process, but absolutely not as difficult as it seems right now. This problem will go away, and do not drop the language.
Thank you. I'm so glad we are 100% agreed on that one. I think we are actually agreed on most of it, and I think now we will have to agree that we have to wrap up. It's been so wonderful to have you with me here, Mariana, today. Thank you so much for doing this, and you did it on a short notice, and it wasn't without hitches before we started, but it's been just great. I've absolutely loved it. Do you have anything you would want to say to all the listeners to finish with?
If you want to learn more about Bilingual Avenue, you can go to bilingualavenue.com and take a list of the podcasts. The ones I highlighted for today are number 4 and number 33, so you can check that out. It's there to be meant to be a guide, a complete free guide for you of what to do, what to expect, and really give you a lot of that emotional and academic support. You know, it's a long journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to have plenty of obstacles, and so really just think of it that way. Tackle each obstacle at a time, be flexible, but know that in the end this is incredibly worthy, and your children will be so thankful in the end.
Fantastic, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Mariana. I've also got there, I think it's about more than 100 articles on my blog at the moment, all to do with bilingual children, bilingualism and language in general. So I welcome you to drop by there. You can get my book, Bringing Up a Bilingual Child. It's available on Amazon, and then on my website I sell a special edition of it where you got 2 extra chapters, and then what you will also get is a membership. We've got different levels of memberships, and the Ladybird membership for a year comes free with the special edition, and for that you will be able to take part in some podcasts which are actually starting next week. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope this has been of help, and I'm sure Mariana will agree. If you have any questions, don't get in touch through our websites or social media. We are both quite frequently on there, and so you can get a hold of us. I can just wish you a really wonderful end of the International Mother Language Day. Hope you can have enjoyed this and enjoyed speaking your language, and that you have got some ideas on how you can make sure you pass it on to your children. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon. And thank you, Mariana.
My pleasure. Adios.
Adios. Bye.
Cheers.